Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty One territory, the home and traditional lands of the Ojibwe, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Carrie Linklater and I am the chairperson this morning, and I am joined via Zoom by Mr. Jerry Arnell and Mr. Kent Seelan. From the assessment department is Ms. Alyssa Adder-Holtna. And our administrative personnel is Sally Caulfield. This morning, we'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. Statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. And as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. This morning, we will be hearing items 1 through 8 on our docket. And Ms. Caulfield, would you please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony?
Ms. Adder-Holtna, will you please state your full name?
Alyssa Adder-Holtna.
My apologies. Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Navarro and Ms. Adder-Holtna. Am I getting better, Alyssa? We are starting
pretty good.
We are starting with item number 1, which is 459 Henderson Highway. And Madam Assessor, whenever you are ready.
File number is 24-2450. Roll number is 020004230000. This is 459 Henderson Highway. Roll year is 2025 with the reference date being April 1st, 2023. The assessed value is $1,290,000. This is Res 2 taxable. The apartment has 1 building on site, which is 2 stories. The actual year built and effective year built are 2017. There are 6 suites and 6 outdoor parking. Going to page 2, we can see here that there is an October 10th, 2018 sale for $1,226,500. Page 3, looking at the income value summary, we can see that there are 6 2-bedroom units, and the average monthly rent per unit is $1,322. Looking at the model derived assessment, we can see that the gross potential rent is 95,220. We have a vacancy rate applied of 2.6%. The effective gross income is 92,744. We have an expense rate of 48.54% applied, and the net operating income is 47,726 with a cap rate of 3.7 applied, which leads to the estimated market value of 1,290,000, and the market value per square foot. Sorry, the market value per suite is 215,000. Going to page 4, we can see the rent comparables. So all our apartments ranging between 2 and 3 stories. The effective year built ranges from 2010 to 2020. We can see here that the total number of units ranges from 8 for the comparables to 19, and that all are 2-bedroom suites. Looking at the gross floor area per unit for the subject, it sits at 1,245 square feet. The comparables range from 800 square feet to 1,128 square feet, and the average monthly rent per unit for the comparables ranges from 1,100 to 1,423. We can notice that there is heat in rent only for comparable 4. Going to page 5, we have our capitalization rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing the property's net operating income by its sale price. So we can see here that there's a range from 3.46% to 5.74% cap. Page 6, some more cap rate evidence. So looking at the city of Winnipeg multifamily, we can see that from the 20th percentile to the 80th percentile, we have a range of cap from 4.75 to 5.45. Page 7 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 8 shows the subject property in the purple rectangle, as well as the image below shows the greater neighborhood overview on map. Page 9 shows a July 2024 Google Street View image on the above, and below we have online ad photos from June 11th, 2020, showing the interior of the apartment. Continuing on page 10. Page 11, we have the mailer information on the left-hand side. And something to note would be that the property tax reported isn't entirely accurate with the 2022 property net taxes that we see on the image on the right for 12,587. But overall, that balances out. It seems to be just because management fees are not what was not a line item in the 2022 financials. And we can see here that there's a line for interest for 37,998.19, which is not a typical operating expense that we would include. So overall, this mailer's NOI is around 41,984, and that seems to be supported by our model NOI at 47. $8,726 from page 3, and that would conclude my presentation. I am open for questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Navarro, if you'd like to proceed with questions.
Yes, please, just very briefly. The cap rates on page 6 show a 20th percentile of 475, assuming only 20% have a lower cap rate than that. You would say that this is on the lower side, correct?
It's on the lower side, but it is a 2017 built, and it's only a 6-unit apartment, so it seems that it would appeal to a wider pool of potential market participants overall.
Okay. And just based on the environment, especially the interest rate climate at that time, would you agree that interest rates at that time were approaching 5%, if not higher than 5%? And that would have been the prime rate set by the central bank. The actual lending rates, especially for a smaller purchaser or smaller investor, would probably not get something close to the prime rate. Would you not agree? There is that
I-
relationship between the two, is there not, between the cap rates and the interest rates?
In developing our model-derived cap rates, the department reviewed sales of multifamily buildings during the Bank of Canada interest rate increases from 2021 to the reference date of April 1st, 2023. The sales analyzed during this period captured the capitalization rates realized, which included how investors factored for higher interest rates. So I hope that answers your question.
We'll leave it at that. I think we can probably get into it in the rebuttal afterwards. So yes, I'm good for questions now. Thank you.
Sure,
My questions have been asked, thanks.
and Mr. Seelan?
Just one question, have you inspected this property?
I personally have not, but I do know that there was an exterior inspection done in July 2019.
Okay, thank you, that's all my questions, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And your brief was entirely model driven, I am assuming?
Correct.
Thank you. And you said there was an exterior
Inspection done in July 2019.
Okay. So I'm thinking there might have been an interior inspection, given that this is a 2017 build, correct? And I'm just wondering if you have any notes on that.
I believe it was only an exterior inspection that was conducted, as I don't think we were able to make arrangements to inspect the interior, and then information used would have been from online images that we were able to find.
Mr. Navarro, if you would like to proceed with your brief, please.
Okay. We're looking at 459 Henderson Highway. If we turn to page 6, we can see the general location. And sorry, 6 and 7. And some overhead views. What I can say about the building, it's not a very complex building. It's obviously wood frame. Show the cost of it would be kind of mitigated by the fact that it's not a steel built building or masonry. So there are some savings that anyone who constructed this type of development would get from that. If we turn to actually page 16, we can see the summary. And there I can summarize all of the variables. So clearly we can see that net operating income is not really an issue in this case. We're above that of the assessor. We have an expense ratio of 40.9% versus 48.5%. The real issue is just the cap rate. We're at 5%, which is what Altus Group / Ryan was supporting. And you can see the cap rates there on page 14 for this type of structure, 2005 plus. We have a range between 5 and 5.75. I haven't seen a lot of 5.75s for newer buildings, to be honest. So I'm not sure if we actually do go as high as that. I put a 5% on it, and that produces a value of $1,095,382 or $1,095,000 rounded. And beyond that, simply the details of the building. As you can see on page 21, this is wood frame. And some of the, I guess, the rental property financial information that the owner had supplied on page 24. So I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Assessor, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Seelan?
Yes, have you inspected this location?
I have not.
That's all my questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Arnell?
No questions, thanks.
I also have no questions. And did you say, Mr. Navarro, that you had rebuttal on this property?
I have rebuttal for all of them, actually. They're kind of like a group rebuttal because I believe the cap rate information that the assessor actually uses is consistent amongst all of these, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's the same cap rate information. So if you'd like afterwards or now, I can briefly speak about that. So the first few pages relate to the interest rate climate at the valuation date, and I believe we just spoke about this in terms of the interest rates that were approaching 5 or exceeding 5 at the time of the reference date.
Okay, I'm gonna
and-
stop there because we don't have the rebuttal.
I'm working on it. I'm almost there.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No worries.
I just went back to refresh my page, Mr. Navarro, and
Okay.
haven't yet.
Actually, this is also in the cap rate report as well. So
Okay, I believe Ms. Caulfield has us straightened around.
Did you receive yours, Madam Assessor?
I haven't.
I did email it, honestly.
Sometimes if you refresh your page, and Mr. Arnell and Mr. Seelan, do you have the rebuttal?
I'm still waiting.
Me too.
Where did you put it in the agenda?
If you refresh your page,
Yeah. I got it, yep.
okay.
They're in the bottom.
I have it as well.
Okay, and Mr. Seelan?
Yes, I see it now. Thanks.
Terrific. All right, Mr. Navarro, we are ready to proceed.
okay. So I don't believe, well, I believe that probably everyone has seen this at one point or another. It's been provided by most of our agents. So the first few pages relate to the interest rates issue, which I just spoke about. On pages 2 and 4, includes sales from the city ranging between 3.46 and 5.74. Top of page 4, we outlined two sales, 727 Sargent and 241 Yonge Street, which are low and outside of the typical range for the market, for a market like Winnipeg. So in these cases, what we believe is happening is that they're buying an alternative investment and not the income that's in place. For 677 Maryland on page 22, city is using older sale at 2020. There are newer sales. There is a newer sale, and our calculated cap rate on that newer sale was 7.11. That is about it. Some of this information would also be found, I believe, in the cap rate report. So I don't think I need to go beyond that. Yeah, I'm good.
All right, thank you. Madam Assessor, any questions to the applicant?
No questions, but I also have cap rate rebuttal that I'd like to present.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, give me a moment, please.
Mr. Seelan, did you have any questions to the applicant?
Sure, so what you're saying with your rebuttal is the cap rate correlates with the interest rate, and that the cap rate would have been higher during this period, is that correct?
Correct.
That's all my questions, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Arnell?
Just one. So you only provided expenses for two of your
You're talking about 727 and 241 Yonge Street?
Yes. I have a hard
Yes.
time reading this thing, but okay, so just the two. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. And I have no questions in regards to this rebuttal. And do we have the city's?
It has been distributed, so
Alright, so if everybody would like to refresh, I think we will have does everybody have the city's rebuttal?
Yep.
All right. Mr. Seelan, you have it?
Sorry, I'm just looking for it. Can you, yes, I can.
it's named ATD rebuttal.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. Much appreciated. I have it.
All right. Madam Assessor, if you would like to proceed with your rebuttal.
So the City of Winnipeg's rebuttal to the Altus 2025 cap rate sales analysis from the page 12 of the Altus cap rate study. Looking at the table, we can see here that for sales 1 through 3, there's only 1 year of income and expense information. And that, in our opinion, is insufficient to calculate a stabilized net operating income and would therefore be unusable. Typically, we use 3 sales of stabilized income and expense. Sale number 4, we don't see actual income and expenses involved in the calculation of the net operating income and would therefore also be unusable. And for sale number 5, the potential gross income utilized by Altus is not based on historically reported information. So in our opinion, it would be incorrectly stabilized. Looking at page 2, we can see that for 345 Talbot Avenue, that there's only the 1 year of income and expense information, and that the average rent levels are inconsistent with rents reported in the prior year. We can see on page 3. Going to page 4 for 677 Maryland Street, there's 1 year of income and expense information here as well. And the average rent levels are inconsistent with rents reported in the prior year, as seen on page 5. Going to page 6 for 738 St. Mary's Road, there's only 1 year of income and expense information, and the average rent levels are inconsistent with the rents reported in the prior year, as seen on page 7 and 8. Going to page 9 for 100 Maryland Street, we see here that there isn't historical data utilized. Going to page 10 for 2390 McPhillips Street, the Altus calculation of average rent levels are inconsistent with rent reported in the prior years. And on page 11, we have a City of Winnipeg stabilization for 2390 McPhillips Street, in which I guess our cap rate differs from 4.71% versus the Altus stabilization with a cap rate of 5.59%. That would conclude my rebuttal. Thank you. And I would ask that this be carried forward for the remainder of the docket if there's any cap rate issues.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Navarro, questions?
Yeah, one of the questions that I have regarding the 1 year of income and expenses, I recognize that you stabilize 3 years if you have that information. Is that a requirement based on appraisal guidelines, IAAO, or is that specifically just a City of Winnipeg process?
City of Winnipeg process.
Okay. Now, I would agree that more data is helpful. However, you would agree also that certain data is irrelevant almost at the time that you're actually analyzing the sale. For example, varying degrees of expenses, for example, snow clearing, that type of thing that vary from 1 year to another, which you can actually get a historical perspective from. So in that sense, probably helpful. But there are certain things, for example, like income, which are more forward-looking. Would those types of expenses that are more so fixed into the future really not be affected by that historical perspective that you would use for the 3 years?
In terms of, I guess, expenses such as utilities, typically we would use the most recent year, that's correct. But in terms for line items such as the snow clearing, repair and maintenance, typically it's nice to have the 3 years of stabilized
Yes,
expense there.
and I do agree that more data often does help, but there are some of those line items that really don't depend on a historical perspective, correct?
In a sense that I guess could be.
For example, taxes, for example, management, for example, insurance, for example, the income, which tends to be more forward-looking, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In terms of the way that we've stabilized them, I think we've covered that in the questioning that we just had. In terms of 2390 McPhillips, I believe several of our agents have come in here and spoken about this one. We knew, and I believe the purchaser was also knowledgeable or knew about this in terms of the rents being below average market. Would you agree that a potential purchaser would see that opportunity and likely account for it in their stabilization or their analysis of the potential market sale of this property?
That could be the case.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell.
No questions, thanks.
Thank you, and Mr. Seeland.
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have no questions. Does either party have a wish for a summation on this property?
No, thanks.
Madam Chair, the only thing that I would comment on is that we've both gone over our rebuttals and presented on that. So if it's possible, if we can have that moved to the following appeals.
Yes, we'll have it carried through. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right. So we will move on to item number 2, which is 244 Talbot Avenue.
File number 24-1489. Roll number is 14091527-100. This is 244 Talbot Avenue. Roll year 2025 with the reference date being April 1st, 2023. The assessed value is $1,432,000. This is Res 2 taxable. The apartment has one building on site, which is 2 stories, and the actual year built and effective year built are both 1961. There are 14 suites and 9 outdoor parking. Going to page 3, we see the number of units in the breakdown. So there are 9 one-bedroom units and 5 two-bedrooms, totaling to 14. And the average monthly rent per unit is $866. Looking at the model-derived assessment, we have a gross potential rent of $145,596 with 2.6% vacancy rate applied. The effective gross income is $141,811. The expense rate applied is 50.01%. And the net operating income is $70,891. We have a cap rate here of 4.95 applied and an estimated market value of $1,432,000, and the market value per suite is $102,285. Going to page 4, we have our rent comparables. So we can see here that all our apartments all have 2 stories, all are one building. For the comparables, we see a range in effective year built from 1965 to 1969. We can see here that for the suite breakdown, most are a mix between 1 and 2 bedrooms, with comparable 3 having bachelor units as well. And comparable 1 would have more of an equal but more 2 bedrooms than 1 bedrooms, like the unit, like the subject properties units would be same with comparable 3. There's more 2 bedrooms than 1 bedrooms, and comparable 4 has more 1 bedrooms than 2 bedrooms. Looking at the gross floor area per unit for the subject, it sits at 833 square feet, and the comparables range from 797 square feet to 871 square feet. Looking at the average monthly rent per unit, we can see that we have a range from $835 to $982. So subject falls within the range. Going to page 5, we have our capitalization rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing the property's net operating income by its sale price. We can see here that there's a range from 3.46% to 5.74% cap. Page 6 is more capitalization rate evidence. So looking at the city of Winnipeg from the 20th percentile and 80th percentile in the multifamily category, we can see that there's a range from 4.75 to 5.45. Page 7 would be the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 8 shows 244 Talbot in an overhead view in the purple rectangle and on a larger map scale on the image below. We can see a Google Street View image on page 9 from June 2021. And as well, images from the subject property's online photos. Continuing on page 10. Page 11 would be the 2022 mailer. Page 12, we can see that there's a NOI realized for 51,000. Page 13 is the 2021 mailer. And continuing on page 14 and 15, we can see that there's a net income for 73,000. There's a 2020 mailer beginning on page 16. And on page 18, we can see that the net operating income is around 72,000 as well, which supports the model net operating income at 70,891. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Mr. Navarro.
Yes, the cap rate that we see there at 4.95%, this is still quite low. That said, I believe what the assessors have said in the past, that the model is adjusting that cap rate downward because of the number of suites, which is actually below 20. Can you confirm that?
I wouldn't be too sure if that's necessarily the driving factor behind the model cap rate
Okay, so
in specifics.
I'm gonna say that it's probably not risk, because I don't think this is the type of model that could analyze risk. So there's probably some other type of factor that's affecting this, correct? Is it the age? Is it the size, the gross floor area,
I think it would be a combination of factors, but I wouldn't be sure which ones are necessarily. I wouldn't know the specifics as to the model.
Okay. In terms of the effective age, I believe this is 1961, but like we would both agree that this has probably been updated over time, correct?
Correct. It seems from the images on page 10 that it is maintained.
Okay. And you would also agree that for the most part, that is actually captured in the rent, as those rents go up with those renovations that are made over time. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell, any questions?
I don't have any questions, thanks.
And Mr. Seelan?
Yes, have you inspected this location?
I have not, but there was an inspection in 2015 by another assessment staff.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
So I'm assuming this property is your brief is model driven, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know if the model takes into consideration the suite mix?
I would assume that it would, but I wouldn't know for certainty in a sense.
Okay. And your suite mix, there's 14 suites, correct?
Correct.
Right, and the split is 9 1-bedroom and 5 2-bedroom, correct?
Correct.
So would you not agree that I'm going to say that's a slightly poor mix for suites? You make more money with a 2-bedroom than you do with the 1-bedroom, correct?
Correct, but typically 1-bedrooms are not as large as the 2-bedrooms, so I wouldn't know if it's necessarily a poor suite mix, just because there would be demand for 1-bedrooms as well as the 2-bedrooms.
Typically, the demand though is for 2-bedrooms, not 1-bedrooms. In anything that's being purposely built now, currently, there's usually more 2-bedrooms. Is that, I'm gonna ask, is that not what you see?
I wouldn't be necessarily too sure about the ideal suite mix for newer builds.
All right, thank you. And this property is 63 years old, correct?
It was built in 1961.
Thank you. Mr. Rivera, if you'd like to proceed.
Absolutely. 244 Talbot Avenue. On pages, oh, you probably don't have the numbering there, do you? So page 6, you can see some pictures, and I believe you're looking at a PDF. So it would be page 6 of however many there are. On pages 7, you'd see the general map area of the property. On page 14, hopefully you're looking at the cap rate information. And for this particular age of property, with that, we would look at the 1944 to 1969 stratification, which goes from 5.75 to 6.50, typically. On page 16, you should see the income summary, and this is what I'm just going to go off of right now. So obviously, we're using our standard approach for this. So we've looked at 3 years. The subject rent, the potential gross rent, is stabilized at 126,509. We haven't accounted for any type of vacancy because we feel that that is already being included. So there's no need to adjust for it. And we've added parking as additional income and miscellaneous income of 563. So that takes it to 130,312. For expenses, we have 70,267. That is 53.9%, and a net operating income of $60,044, to which we've applied a 5.75 cap rate for 1,044,251, 1,044,000 rounded. And beyond that, we just have the stabilization on the next, sorry, the repair and maintenance on the next page, which is roughly 891 per suite. And in the appendix, just the income expenses that were submitted by the owner and some additional property information. So I am open for questions.
Any questions, Madam Assessor?
No questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Seelan
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
and Mr. Arnell.
Just one on your page 16. Like, how would you stabilize your rent at 126 when in 20 and 21 and 22 were all, or 20 and 21 were both higher, and your average is higher than that?
Yeah.
So,
Probably
well,
just looked at the first year, but for the last year, but you're making a valid point that we could have probably stabilized it a little bit higher at 131, 132.
That's the only question I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Rivero, I'm going to assume you did not inspect this property, correct?
No, I don't believe I've been into any of these buildings actually in the past.
Does either party have a wish for a summation?
No thanks.
Nope, thank you.
All right. And I'm just going to make note that your rebuttal cap rate information is carried forward to this property. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 3, which is 275 Winter Avenue. And Assessor, whenever you're ready to proceed.
File number is 24-2548. Roll number 14091587000. This is 275 Midwinter Avenue. Roll year is 2025 with the reference date being April 1st, 2023. The assessed value is 1,480,000. This is res 2 and taxable. And I would request that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation. And if we go to page 8, we can see here that for the item number LP 726485645 CA, that there's the signature. And then on page 9, we can see here that for the request for property sale and income and expense information, that the same tracking number LP 726485645 CA is seen as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions on this non-co-op?
Madam Chair, we were actually going to ask for just a confirmation on this one because I was not able to verify this information in time. So if that is okay, we'd like to just confirm it.
All right, confirm the non-co-op.
Actually confirm the entire thing.
All right, thank you. Ask, Mr. Seeland, do you have any questions regarding this?
I don't, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Arnell?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. We also have no questions, and this is noted. Mr. Navarro, your confirmation.
Thank you.
We will move on then to item number 4, which is 1222 Plessis Road.
File number 24-1356, roll number 0900704700. Address is 1222 Plessy Road. Roll year is 2025 with the reference date being April 1st, 2023. The assessed value is 1,598,000. This is res 2 taxable. The apartment has 1 building on site, which is 3 stories. The actual year built and effective year built are both 1973. We have 18 suites and 18 parking count as well. Going to page 3, we see the suite breakdown. So there are 14 1-bedrooms and 4 2-bedrooms here. And the average monthly rent per unit is $877. Looking at our model derived assessment, we see that there's a gross potential rent for 189,620 with a 2.6% vacancy rate applied. Our effective gross income is 184,690 and our expense rate applied is 49.81%. Net operating income here is 92,696. And we have a capitalization rate of 5.8% applied. And our estimated market value, again, is 1,598,000. The market value per suite here is $88,777. Going to page 4, we can see that the comparables all are apartments. The comparables have 2 stories, all 1 building on site. Comparables effective year built range from 1961 to 1969. And the suite mix, looking at the comparables, for the most part, are primarily the 2-bedroom. The gross floor area per unit for the subject is 830 square feet. For the comparables, it's larger, ranging from 920 square feet to 969 square feet. We see an average monthly rent per unit ranging from $969 to $1,100. Going to page 5, we have our capitalization rate evidence. So the following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing the property's net operating income by its sale price. And we see here the range is from 3.46% to 5.74%. So our subject falls slightly out of those parameters. And then we have on page 6 more capitalization rate evidence. So for the multifamily city of Winnipeg, the 20th and 80th percentile range from 4.75 to 5.45. And then we see in the low rise from the, I guess, the broker reports, it ranges from 5 to 6 for Colliers, and then for CBRE from 5 to 5.25, and for Cushman & Wakefield 5 to 5.75. So it seems that our cap rate here for 5.8 is falling out of those parameters as well. And then page 7, we have the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 8 shows the subject property in the purple box for the first image, and then a map view image for a greater location. So it's in Transcona area. Looking at page 9, we see online information for subject property and some images. Again, on page 10, we have images of the subject property. On page 11, we have the 2022 mailer. Page 13 and 14 would be the financial statements. We can see that the NOI here is reported around 40,000. And now looking at, I guess, going back to page 3 for the model-derived assessment. Overall, I feel that a expense rate of 49.81% is reasonable, as that's typically what we've seen reported for that market area. And looking at the market value per suite on the per suite unit basis, 88,777 seems a well-supported figure when we look at the table from page 5 and just seeing the price per suite for some of the other 1970 effective age properties. Although I guess the financial NOI and model NOI aren't necessarily the same, I feel that the overall assessment of 1,598,000 is well supported in terms of reflecting market value when we look at this on a market value per suite basis. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
I'm sorry, but did you have the market value per suite for this one?
That is on page 3, so it's a lighter font of gray
Oh, right.
on the bottom.
88,777. Okay. No other questions, thank you.
Mr. Arno
No questions, thanks.
and Mr. Seelan.
Have you inspected this location?
I personally have not. And I'm not too sure if another assessment staff has within recent years. I'd have to check up on that. Just give me a moment.
Sure. Thanks.
Nothing that would be obvious to me as of now.
Sure. What do you feel would be driving the cap rate high to a 5.8% cap?
It definitely falls within, I guess, that 80th percentile range on the outside parameters of that range. I wouldn't know specifically. It does seem to be higher than what we've typically been seeing and even what's reported by the, I guess, secondary broker reports as well on page 6. It does seem high, but I wouldn't know why.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Would you agree on page 10, you've got photos of the property? Although the furnishings are new, would you agree that this does not look like it's had a refresh?
It looks well maintained. The furnishing is new, and I guess when we look at perhaps the kitchen, it seems, I'm not sure if that would be a newer counter, but the stovetop is not necessarily the most modernized, but we don't have an effective year built from the actual year built, so it seems well represented.
So you would agree though, if you look closely at the kitchen cabinets and the countertop and the flooring, it's got an overhead fluorescent light. It has similar cabinetry in the bathroom. Has an arborite countertop. So would those items not lead you to believe that this property has not been refreshed?
No, and we're not necessarily, I guess, making a statement that it has been refreshed. It's well maintained.
And also on your page 4, just going back up here. On your rent comparables, do you know if any of those properties have been remodeled?
I wouldn't know.
These were all chosen by the model, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, that's all my questions. Mr. Navarro, if you would like to proceed.
Yes, starting on page 2, we have the assessment summary. On pages 6 and 7, we have pictures of the property with the map on page 7 showing the general area. So this is just a little bit south of the corner of Pandora and Plessis Road. If we turn to pages 14, you can see that for the age category, 1970 to 1989, the range of cap rates is 5.5 to 6.25. And on page 16, I can go over the summary of the property. So we have the subject stabilized at 204,978, the most recent year. So this actually goes back to one of the previous properties as well. So why did we go with 2022 in this case? Because it is the most recent years, and we can assume that the CMHC, sorry, the RTB rates will go from there forward. Every year the RTB comes out with a standard increase, and it would move forward from the last year, which is 2022. So that's why we've chosen the year 204978. Now, in terms of vacancy, this one actually doesn't have the vacancy included, so we have adjusted for it at the market rate of 2.6%, giving us an effective gross rent of $199,649. We've added for a laundry, a refund, and miscellaneous income. That gives us 207,898. And in terms of expenses, we have expenses of 132,937. The expenses are what they are. You can tell that this property is being maintained, hence the stabilization you can see of the R&M is $1,442. So they are paying to keep this property properly maintained. And on the following page, you can actually see the summary of that repair and maintenance. At the bottom, again, you see $1,442. We have a net operating income of $74,961, and we've applied a 5.50 cap rate to this property. The end value is $1,362,934 or $1,363,000. Beyond that, just some regular property information and the financials that they've submitted. So I am open for questions.
Thank you. Madam Assessor, any questions to the applicant?
So looking at the Altus cap rate study, would you agree that for the expense ratio in that study that I guess you haven't seen a figure such as 63.9% for an expense ratio?
The expense ratio is unfortunately what it is. So yes, actually we have seen expense ratios above 60%. However, in recognizing that, typically the cap rate that we would have sought is either a 5.75 or a 6.0. So I made an adjustment on the capitalization rate to account for some of that as well, taking it to 5.50.
Okay, no further questions, thanks.
Mr. Seelan.
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Arnell?
On just the one on the page 17 on your expenses, like the plumbing expense in 20 was almost 23,000, which throws your average to 24. But would that be a capital expenditure? Like what would be so high during the repair at 22,000?
Yeah, I would say that there probably is some capital in that. However, we stabilized it at 6159, not anywhere near the.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but would you use a capital number even for stabilization reasons? Like capital shouldn't even be an expense, correct?
No, exactly. So we adjust for what is typical. So we would always see some type of plumbing adjustments in most properties, and at the same time, for example, if they're repairing plumbing in the property, and this is an older property, that can be quite common. So fixing a toilet, fixing the any of the faucets or the piping in the kitchen, those are pretty common occurrences in any apartment building.
Granted, however, I think it looks like there's some capital costs involved in there. Because it
Yes.
seems to be too high.
I would agree with that. However, we have tried to stabilize that at a much, much lower value.
Okay, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
And I have no questions. Does either party have a wish for summation?
Yes, so I guess when looking at the expense rate that the city has applied of 49.81%, I feel like that is very reasonable for that market area being in Transcona. And when we look at the assessment on a market value per unit basis, 88,777 definitely falls within the parameters for the other 1970 builds that we can even see in the cap rate table that we provided on page 5 of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Navarro?
I would emphasize that without actually knowing what's going on in the property, in terms of the repairs and maintenance and having a regular schedule of inspections, I don't think you can conclude that based on the model. And that's why I think you would have to default to what is actually happening in the property. However, we've tried to account for some of that simply by adjusting the cap rate as well. So I think we've made fair adjustments in this case. Thank you.
And again, the cap rebuttal is carrying forward to this property. I think at this time, we're going to take a short recess of 10 minutes. It's after 10 o'clock. Sure, everybody would like a short recess. Thank you. I would like to call this meeting back to order. We are going to be proceeding to item number 5 on our docket, which is 603 Nottingham Avenue. Madam Assessor, whenever you are ready.
File number 24-2749, roll number 02050000100603 Nottingham Avenue is the address. Roll year is 2025 with the reference date being April 1st, 2023. The assessed value is $1,724,000. This is Res 2 taxable. The apartment has one building on site, which is 2 stories. The actual year built and effective year built are both 1965. We have 16 suites and 15 outdoor parking count. Going to page 3, we can see the suite breakdown consists of 10 one-bedroom units and 5 two-bedrooms and 1 bachelor, totaling to 16 units. We have $898 as the average monthly rent per unit. Looking at the model-driven assessment, we have a gross potential rent being $172,591 with a vacancy rate of 2.6% applied. The effective gross income is $168,104, and the expense rate applied is 49.23%. Net operating income is $85,346. With a capitalization rate being 4.95%. Our estimated market value is $1,724,000, and the market value per suite here is $107,750. Going to page 4, we have our rent comparables. So we can see here that all our apartments all have 2 stories and 1 building. The effective year built for the comparables ranges from 1965 to 1971. And we can see that there's a suite mix being for comparable 1, it's equal in 1 and 2 bedrooms. Comparable 2, there's more 1 bedrooms than 2 bedrooms. Similar to the subject. Comparable 3 has 1 bachelor, 19 one bedrooms, 10 two bedrooms, and comparable 4 has 17 one bedrooms and 12 two bedrooms. The gross floor area per unit for the subject is 918 square feet, and for the comparables, there's a range from 865 square feet to 941 square feet. the average monthly rent per unit for the comparables ranges from $909 to $1,024. All have heat and rent included. Looking at page 5, we have our capitalization rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing the property's net operating income by its sale price. So we can see here in the table that there's a cap rate range from 3.46% to 5.74%. Page 6 would show City of Winnipeg, multifamily, the 20th to 80th percentile being 4.75 to 5.45. Page 7 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 8 shows the subject property in the purple outline, as well as the lower half of the page shows the subject property on a greater neighborhood map. Page 9 shows online information for the subject property and an image of the exterior. Page 10 would show the interior images, as well as on page 11. Page 12, we have the financials for 2022. And we can see that the maintenance and decorating is pretty high for a 16-unit apartment count. And I believe that the repair and maintenance is coming in at around $3,000 per unit, which is typically higher than what we would see. And we can see that for the 2021, they realize an NOI of 80,000. And if we applied for the 2022 repair and maintenance at 1,500 per unit, we would realize an NOI around 86,000 per unit. And going back to, I believe, page 3 of the brief, that would be in line with what we're seeing in the model's net operating income as well at 85,000. That would conclude my presentation. I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Navarro?
Yes, the comment that you just made about the R&M at about $1,500 that would align with the model, how did you come up with that?
Typically, that's what we've been seeing. We've been seeing, I guess, on a high range for repair and maintenance for apartments would be $2,000, and on the lower range would be 1,000. So it's just what I felt was a fair, happy medium.
Okay, but you would agree that without actually having a concise look at the R&M over a period of time, it's hard to make that judgment call, is it not?
And that's where, I guess, looking at the 2021 financials, it's already supporting the model at 80,000 for NOI. And I wouldn't, I guess, have, in a sense, better financials than what's provided. So I don't have like a line by line item breakdown
Right,
to
right.
determine
Okay,
anything specific.
okay. That's my question. Thank you.
Mr. Arnell
No questions, thanks.
and Mr. Seeland.
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And this was all model driven, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, and Mr. Applicant, if you would like to proceed.
Absolutely. So this is 603 Nottingham Avenue. On pages 6 and 7, you can see the pictures and the general location on page 7. Cap rate information is on page 14. This property is effective 1965. So on our cap rate chart, that would be 5.75 to 6.50 for good locations. So on page 16, you can see the income summary. At the very top, we have 187,281 or 821, 5.5% vacancy, effective gross rent of 177,484, laundry of 3620, and an effective gross income of 181,104. In terms of expenses, we have an expense total of 101,333, with a stabilized R&M of 1858 per suite. That is a 56% expense ratio, producing a net operating income of 79,771 and a cap rate of 5.75. On the next page, you can see the, on page 17, you can see the R&M breakdown. Again, 16 suites. On the right-hand side where it says 5-year average, that is the average of the 5 years that we looked at. And the stabilization is next to that. Now we've come up with an R&M per suite of 1858. And beyond this, I believe just the regular property information and the income and expenses that were submitted by the owner. So I am open for questions.
Any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell
No questions, thanks.
and Mr. Seelan,
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
thank you. And I also have no questions. Does either party have a wish for a summation on this property?
I do not.
No summation, please. Thank you.
And again, the cap rate rebuttal will apply to this property. We're going to move on to item number 6, which is 765 Watt Street, and I believe there is a recommendation on this property.
Correct.
If you would like to proceed, thank you.
File number is 24-1498, roll number 020116540000. This is 765 Watt Street. Roll year is 2025 with a reference date April 1st, 2023. We have a recommendation for 1,433,000. This is Res 2 taxable. If we, I guess actual year built and effective year built is 1961. There are 17 suites and 16 outdoor parking stalls. If we jump to page 10 to see the calculations for the recommendation, we can see that we have an EGI for, and I guess this property and the next one had combined expenses. So overall, the stabilization is from the, I guess, from the combined. And then anyways, so the EGI that we have here is 361,444. And then we felt it was fair to apply a repair and maintenance at 1,800 per unit. And our net operating income for The subject is 72,391, which is very similar to, I looked at the applicant's brief. Their NOI, I believe, is at 72,844 for the subject property. So it seems to just be, I guess, a difference in the capitalization rate. And we have here a capitalization rate of 5.05%. And that would lead to our estimated property value of $1,433,000.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro? Are you willing
Uh,
to accept the recommendation?
I like what the assessor has done with the stabilization here of the net operating income, but I can't agree to the capitalization rate, unfortunately. So no, we would not accept that.
Thank you. You would like to continue with your brief,
Okay,
the assessor? Thank you.
so going to page 3, we can see the unit breakdown consists of 6 one-bedrooms and 11 two-bedrooms, coming to our 17 units. And that I guess we will jump forward to page 4. We have our rent comparables, so we can see here that the comparables are all apartments, 2 stories, 1 bedroom. The effective year built ranges from 1958 to 1963, and that the unit breakdown amongst the comparables consist of primarily 2 bedrooms with less 1 bedrooms, similar to that of the subject. The subject has a gross floor area per unit of 1,009 square feet, and the comparables have a range from 936 square feet to 1,138 square feet, and the comparables have a monthly rent per unit ranging from $908 to $1,126. And we can see that for comparable 3, there is no heat and rent. Going to page 5, we have our capitalization rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing the property's net operating income by its sale price. And we can see here that the range is from 3.46% to 5.74% in the table. So subject being at 5.05% falls within the range. Page 6, we have more capitalization rate evidence looking at the city of Winnipeg's multifamily for the 20th and 80th percentile. We can see that the range is from 4.75 to 5.45, and the subject property falls within that range as well. Page 7 is Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 8 shows the subject property in a purple rectangle, as well as the neighborhood location on the lower half of the page. We have some exterior images on page 9 for the October 2018 Google Street View. And then if we jump to page 11 through 19, we have 3 years of income and expense information provided. That would conclude my presentation.
Any further questions, Mr. Navarro?
I have no questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Arnell?
And just confirmation on the NOI you used?
The net operating income for the recommendation is 72,391.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, and Mr. Seelig?
My questions have been asked and answered, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to confirm, Madam Assessor, this brief is entirely mob driven, correct?
Correct, but on page 10, right, the recommendation was for 1,433,000.
Thank you. That is all my questions. Does either party have a wish for a summation on this property?
I think I still have to present.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please proceed.
Okay. I'll make this quite quick actually, because I think what we're dealing with is primarily a cap rate issue. So on page 14 of the presentation, you can see our stratification there for this grouping of 1946 to 1969. The range is 5.79 to 6.50. That would be for good locations. I don't see too much to adjust here. However, we did go on the lower end and we applied a 5.75% cap rate to this. So based on the net operating income that you see there of 72,844, that produces a market value of 1,266,854 or 1,267,000 rounded. And I am open for questions.
Any questions, Madam Assessor?
No questions, thanks.
And Mr. Arnell
No questions, thanks.
and Mr. Seelig?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one quick question, Mr. Barrow. You didn't happen to have a chance to inspect this property, did you?
No, I have not inspected, after looking at the entire list, I have not inspected any of these in the past.
All right, thank you. Okay, now, does anybody have a wish for a summation on this property?
I'm good, thanks.
I'm good as well, thank you.
All right. And again, cap rate rebuttal carried forward to this property. And then we will move on to, and I'm going to assume this is a sister property, item number 7.
That's correct.
Yeah, so, and again, Madam Assessor, you have the recommendation for this property, if you would like to proceed.
File number 24-1497, roll number 020117070000. Address is 755 Watt Street. Roll year is 2025 with a reference date being April 1st, 2023. I have a recommendation today to reduce the assessment to 1,433,000 to better reflect market value. And if we jump to page 10, we can see the stabilization that led to that recommendation. And again, our NOI here is at 72,391, and looking at the applicant's brief in advance, their NOI seems to be at 72,533. So again, this seems to be that it's a difference in capitalization rate. Here we have 5.05% applied, which led to the recommendation of $1,433,000.
Thank you. And Mr. Navarro?
No, we would not accept this. Same as the property before. It's just a cap rate issue.
And thank you. If you'd like to continue, Madam Assessor with your brief.
Going back to page 1, we can see that it's an apartment, that there is one building, which is 2 stories on site, and that the year built and the effective year built are both 1961. We have 17 suites and 16 outdoor parking. The suite breakdown here is 6 1-bedroom units and 11 2-bedroom units, totaling the 17 for the apartment. Based on the recommendation, the market value per suite would be 84,294 per unit. And then going to page 4 for rent comparables, we can see here that comparables all are apartments, 2 stories, 1 building on site. The effective year built ranges from 1958 to 1963. We have a suite mix containing primarily more 2 bedrooms than 1 bedrooms, and the subject has a gross floor area per unit of 1,009 square feet, and the comparables range from 936 square feet to 1,138 square feet, and the monthly rent per unit for the comparables range from $908 to $1,126. And we can see that comparable 1 does not have heat included in rent. Going to page 5, we have our capitalization rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing the property's net operating income by its sale price. So we can see in the table that we have a range from 3.46% to 5.74%, with subject property being at 5.05 cap, falling within that range. Looking at page 6, we have the multifamily City of Winnipeg 20th percentile to 80th percentile range from 4.75 to 5.45 cap. Again, the subject cap falls within that range as well. Page 7, we have the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 8 shows the subject property in the purple rectangle, as well as the location in the lower half. We have exterior images for the subject property as well on page 9 from October 2018. Page 10 shows the recommendation. And then page 11 through 20 would be the income and expense information for the subject property. That would conclude my presentation. I am open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro.
I guess the only question that I would have is that we're basically dealing with the same property that we just dealt with.
Correct, sister property.
Exactly. So everything is the same, basically. Same year built, same complement of suites, everything.
Correct.
However, the model is predicting a substantially higher rent for 755 watt. Would you know exactly why it's doing that?
I wouldn't know. It could be that there's certain characteristics in terms of quality that may have been, I guess, different for the 2 buildings, perhaps.
Okay. Now they're basically built the same way, masonry bearing walls, 1961, 17 suites, 16 outdoor parking stalls each. I mean, really, they are very similar. So, okay, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ardell, questions?
No questions, thanks.
And Mr. Seelan?
My question's been asked and answered. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and likewise, my question was asked and answered. Mr. Navarro, if you would like to proceed with your brief?
Yeah, this is 755 Watt Street. Page 6 and 7, you can find the pictures and general map location. Again, we're dealing with the sister property of the previous one, built in the same year. And so the cap rate we would look at is the 1946 to 1969 range, going from 5.75 to 6.50. And on page 16, you can find the income summary. As you can see there, there's not much of a difference between our previous property and this one, and there shouldn't be. So we have a net operating income of 72,533. The stabilized R&M is 1878 per suite. And we've applied a 5.75% cap rate to this, producing a value of 1,261,439 or 1,261,000 rounded. And the rest of the brief with the appendix just includes the same information as the previous one, including the income and expenses. So I am open for questions.
Thank you. And Madam Assessor, any questions to the applicant?
No, thanks.
And Mr. Seelan
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
and Mr. Arnell?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. I also have no questions. Does either party have a wish for summation?
No, thanks.
I don't have any summation. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, the cap rate rebuttal applies to this property. We'll move on to the last item on the docket, item number 8, which is 635 Watt Street.
File number is 24-1496. Roll number is 020411630000. This is 635 Watt Street. Roll year is 2025 with the reference date being April 1st, 2023. The assessed value is 1,995,000. This is Res 2 taxable. The apartment has one building on site, which is 2 stories. The actual year built and effective year built are both 1959. We have 22 suites for the apartment and 19 outdoor parking count. Going to page 3, we can see the suite breakdown. It consists of 19 one-bedroom units and 3 two-bedroom units, totaling 22. The average monthly rent per unit is $872.97. Looking at the model-driven assessment, and I guess looking at the applicant's brief in advance, our net operating incomes are both similar, us being at 100,765, and I'm pretty sure they're at 100,628. So it seems to be in a cap rate issue. We are at 5.05% cap, and that would lead us to our estimated market value of $1,995,000. The market value per suite here is $90,681. Looking at page 4, we have our rent comparables. So all our apartments containing 2 stories and 1 building on site. The effective year built for the comparables ranges from 1958 to 1965. We have for comparable 1, there are 19 units, 7 of which are 1 bedrooms, 12 are 2 bedrooms. Comparable 2, we have 1 bachelor, 19 1 bedrooms, and 10 2 bedrooms. Comparable 3, there are 7 1 bedrooms and 11 2 bedrooms. Comparable 4 has 10 1 bedrooms and 4 2 bedrooms. Looking at the gross floor area per unit, the subject has 838 square feet. And the comparables range from 835 square feet to 1,138 square feet. The average monthly rent per unit ranges from $835 to 1,019. And we can see here that comparable 3 does not have the heat and rent. Going to page 5, we have our capitalization rate evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Net operating income has been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Capitalization rates have been derived by dividing the property's net operating income by its sale price. And we can see here there's a range from 3.46% in the table to 5.74% cap. And the subject is at 5.05% cap, following within the range. Page 6, we have more capitalization rate evidence. So the multifamily city of Winnipeg, 20th to 80th percentile, shows a range of 4.75 to 5.45. Again, we are within that range for the subject's cap. Page 7 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 8 shows the subject in an aerial view in purple, as well as the lower image shows location. Page 9 would show the Google Street View from July 2024. Exterior image there. And then page 10 would show some online images of the subject property. So we can see the exterior, the bathroom. Page 11, the kitchen. And then on page 12, we have the 2022 financial statement. So going to page 13, we can see that there's a line item for major expenditures in which, sorry, I lost my major expenditure. Oh, it's on page 14. That would make sense. So on page 14, there's a major expenditure expense for 25,761. And overall, when we, I guess, extract that as capital, our NOI is in line with the mailer's NOI. And then we have on page 15, the 2021 income and expense information, again, showing the net operating income here is in line with the model. And then we have on page 19, the 2020 income and expense statement. Again, showing that the net operating income is in line with that of the model. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Seelan,
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
thank you. And Mr. Arnell,
No questions, thanks.
I also have no questions. Mr. Navarro, if you would like to proceed.
Yes, if the panel could just turn to page 16. So this building is similar to the last two in terms of the period that it was built in. This one is just a couple of years older, at 1959. So that cap rate again ranges between 5.75 and 6.50. So we've put it at 5.75. That gives us an indicated market value of 1,750,044, 1,750,000 rounded. And over on the next page, you can actually see the R&M that we've noted. There's really not much of a difference in terms of our NOI, so the R&M shouldn't be an issue. However, I did note that the assessor spoke about those extraordinary repairs in 2022, and you can see them at the very top of page 17 under 2022 under extraordinary repairs. And you can see that they are actually excluded from our R&M study. So beyond that, just the appendix with the regular information that we provide on all of these and the income and expenses that were submitted. So I'm open for questions.
Any questions, Madam Assessor?
No questions, thank you.
And Mr. Arnell
No questions, thanks.
and Mr. Seelan?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have no questions. Does either party have a wish for a summation on this property?
No thanks.
No summation, thank you.
Thank you. And again, the cap rate rebuttal will apply to this property. We have heard items 1 through 8 this morning, and this hearing is adjourned. And I'd like to thank Mr. Navarro and Ms. Ada Havana for the presentations. And this hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
You
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.